Isolation Cell, Maximum Security. U.S. Penitentiary, Leavenworth, Kansas. "Don't wear a tie unless it's a clip-on," Associate Warden Lee Connor warned me. "Silverstein might grab it through the bars to choke you." Connor unlocked the solid steel door that led from the prison's administration building into the bowels of the ancient penitentiary. I was being taken to interview Thomas Edward Silverstein. It would be the first and only time a journalist would be allowed to speak to him face-to-face during his lifetime. He was being held in a dungeon-like basement cell isolated from the rest of the prison population as punishment for murdering a correctional officer, CO, and committing other killings in prison. Silverstein had fatally stabbed Officer Merle Eugene Klutz 40 times on the morning of October 22, 1983. 8 hours later, another prisoner, Clayton Anthony Fountain, pulled the shank on 3 officers and murdered Officer Robert L. Hoffman, Sr. Never before in the history of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, known by the initials BOP, had 2 officers been murdered by convicts on the same day in the same prison inside the same cell block. The fallout from these brutal murders would usher in a new era in corrections, the emergence of supermax penitentiaries, where the worst of the worst inmates would be locked in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, only being allowed to leave their cells in shackles and under heavy guard. Silverstein's and Fountain's actions would condemn both to the most draconian punishment permitted under the U.S. Constitution. At the time of the 2 killings, neither man could be executed because there was no federal death penalty. Both already had received multiple life prison terms for murders they'd committed earlier. They had nothing to fear by continuing to kill, authorities said. To prevent them from hurting prison staff and other convicts, the BOP placed both under no human contact. They were to be cut off from the outside world, as if they were characters in Edgar Allan Poe's classic The Cask of Amontillado, where a victim was entombed behind a brick wall with no escape. Silverstein and Fountain were housed initially inside tiny isolation cells, where they received only the minimum constitutional requirements. Silverstein spent 9 months wearing only a pair of prison-issued boxer shorts inside a steel-lined cell that was only 6 feet by 7 feet, almost the size of a king mattress, with nothing but a thin mattress pad and toilet inside it. He could touch its ceiling. The cell's door was solid steel. Food came through a slot that otherwise was locked shut. None of the correctional officers watching him would speak to him out of deference to their fallen co-workers. No newspapers, magazines, radio, television, or visits with those outside of prison were permitted. No writing materials, neither pencils nor pens. No mail, either incoming or outgoing. The lights in his cell were kept on 24 hours per day and never dimmed. Clayton Fountain lived under equally harsh conditions at a different federal penitentiary. They had no meaningful human contact and nothing but their own minds to occupy their time. In private conversations, prison officials expected and quietly hoped both would break mentally and choose to end their own lives rather than spend the coming years alone in such isolation. Neither did. Silverstein had endured 5 years under no human contact when I began my descent into Leavenworth's underbelly to meet with him. By then, the BOP had begrudgingly provided Silverstein with a few niceties. This was not done out of kindness, but for control. It had proven difficult to manage him if there was nothing that he valued that could be taken away. Good behavior, for such simple acts as returning empty food trays, was being rewarded with clothing, letters from the outside world, a once-a-month telephone call, and drawing materials. I was being allowed to meet him because I was writing a book, The Hothouse: Life Inside Leavenworth Prison, about everyday events that happened inside the maximum security prison. Never before had the BOP agreed to allow a writer unlimited access to one of its penitentiaries. I was allowed to roam free inside the penitentiary without an escort and speak to any convict or staff member who agreed to speak to me. Initially, I intended to spend a year watching events and conducting interviews, but my research took twice as long. This was because I began alternating my prison visits. I would spend a month behind